Some people have different hobbies with learning a lot about how cars work, and one guy that was really passionate about professional racing in cars and all the engineering that goes into it. And I couldn't really follow what he was saying. There's clearly a passion there. And as people develop like an interest, there's a difference between an interest and a passion. As people develop an interest into a passion, there's a certain threshold where after someone has passed over that threshold, you go, this person's really into this. Like, this is part of who they are. And I realized that one thing that I really resonate with, something that is part of my identity, is understanding mental health and well-being, and also confronting some of the issues of what is going wrong with the way that we're living today and the conditions of modern society that adversely affect mental health. And I'm trying to join some groups branching out with different people to talk about different subjects. And one thing that I ran into was an excerpt, a part of the Whinnie the Pooh story, where we're talking about depression and how it's really difficult to connect with other people with this catch-22. When you're isolated and alone, how do you fix isolation and loneliness?
Well, it's easy. You just need to go out there and meet some people, right?
The catch-22 is nobody wants to be around someone who's miserable, but in order to not be miserable, you have to be around other people who accept that so that you can overcome it. But it's not necessarily something that can effectively be overcome by tricking yourself on your own into thinking into a more positive Bronze Age mindset, bruh. Just be more alpha, bruh. That kind of stuff does not naturally happen in isolation. Absolutely not. That would take insanity. But okay, so the thing that I want to get at is there's a sentiment of support, of friendship and support, that is just not part of the modern culture. But we do have that sentiment in writing, like in what takes place in the 100-Acre Wood here. So this is a reading from Whinnie the Pooh. It occurred to Pooh and Piglet that they hadn't heard from Eeyore for several days, so they put on their hats and their coats and trotted across the 100-Acre Wood to Eeyore's stick house. Inside the house was Eeyore. "Hello, Eeyore," said Pooh. "Hello, Pooh." "Hello, Piglet," said Eeyore in a glum-sounding voice. "We thought we'd check in on you," said Piglet, "because we hadn't heard from you, and we wanted to know if you were okay." Eeyore was silent for a moment. "Am I okay?" he asked eventually. "Well, I don't know, to be honest. Are any of us really okay? That's what I ask myself. All I can tell you, Pooh and Piglet, is that right now I feel rather sad and alone, and not much fun to be around at all, which is why I haven't bothered you. Because you wouldn't want to waste your time hanging around with someone who's sad and alone, and not much fun to be around at all, would you now?" Pooh looked at Piglet, and Piglet looked at Pooh. They both sat down, one on either side of Eeyore. Eeyore looked at them in surprise. "What are you doing?" "We're sitting here with you," said Pooh, "because we are your friends, and true friends don't care if someone's feeling sad or alone or not much fun to be around at all. True friends are there for you anyway, and so here we are." "Oh," said Eeyore. "Oh." And the three of them sat there in silence, and while Pooh and Piglet said nothing at all, somehow, almost imperceptibly, Eeyore started to feel a tiny little bit better, because Pooh and Piglet were there, no more, no less. It's the end of the excerpt from Whinnie the Pooh. And yeah, it's a children's story, and yeah, we have talking animals in a ridiculous sort of situation. But there's a very important message that's there, an important aspect of humanity, of just being there to support your friends means a lot to someone. That reaches towards a very fundamental human experience that a lot of people have not so much forgotten about, because it's like an undertone that we long for that. We have an instinct to need to be around supportive people. But oh my gosh, my head is racing with things that are that go wrong with modernity, subverting healthy instincts into unhealthy manners. Let's just pick two of them. One is this concept of it's noble to suffer. Of I don't need to be around my friends. I just need to focus on work. I need to get more things done, and if I get more things done, then I'll be a better worker, and I'll be more. And it's not necessarily in the context of like we have this goal of being a better worker so much as we want to live well, and to be able to live well, we're supposed to have a job that makes a lot of money, and then we can buy nice things, and we're going to be okay that way. It's very loose, this idea of, well, what's the motivation for pursuing a career that's really demanding? But you think, well, if I put enough effort into this, then I'll be successful and then I'll be happy. That's ignoring the aspect of socialization, of meaningful socialization. Other thing is, you don't want to show the sad and the glum and not fun to be around aspects of you on social media. Social media is curated experiences of unreality. It's the things that you selectively want to share with others, and when you're exposed to that, that's not the reality. That's not like the hard stuff that you have to go through. Social media is slice of life porn. It's basically pornography for vicariously living out experiences of, hey, look, I'm going to Jamaica and having such a good time on the beach. But people generally do not talk about significant emotional struggles that they're going through with like trying to connect with people on some issue or another that's really personal to them. It's social media, it's not personal media. You will find people, it's a very strange situation because we all, and anyone who's been on social media for a significant amount of time has encountered people who seem to whine and complain all the time. And this is another weird selective effect of how social media is unreality. The kind of person that would be compelled to share their problems on social media to like strangers, openly and publicly, there's a certain kind of attentional neediness that does border on crazy there. It's very unlikely that they understand the social appropriateness of sharing emotional vulnerabilities. And it's likely that the only motivation that they would have for sharing those emotional problems with a high visibility is because they've gotten positive social feedback from that. And there is a huge, huge gender gap between how people react to women expressing emotional vulnerability and how people react to men expressing emotional vulnerability. Women don't want a vulnerable man. I know I'm speaking in broad strokes here, but in the current cultural context that's out there, it is absolutely unacceptable for men to show vulnerability. That feeds into the selection bias of why on social media, the people that would share emotional vulnerabilities, it's more likely that a woman would share those emotional vulnerabilities because she would get the positive feedback from that. And there's also higher rates of neuroticism, of being overly self-focused, as well as having less qualms about shoving your problems onto other people instead of trying to personally address them. And here's another thing that's whack with the selection bias. People who want to who have personal agency, they want to overcome their issues. They don't want to burden others. They're going to hide that. They're going to hide that need for emotional connection. And these are the people that will react the best to having just a little bit of social attention that helps them to connect with their sense of humanity that is being robbed of them from being isolated for significant amounts of time, which is absolutely unnatural. So the kind of people that would benefit the most are the people who are least likely to seek the attention that they really need. And in any natural situation, so here's the thing, where when you are interacting in person, you don't verbally say, I feel absolutely miserable and I need you to say things that make me feel better. The kind of communication that we have on social media is not how we express emotional distress, and it's not how we show support for emotional distress either. When someone's sad and lonely, the natural reactions of how do we express this? It is very uncomfortable and socially unacceptable to verbalize things in a very blunt manner, or even to hint at vulnerabilities that go on. I keep using the word vulnerabilities. To even hint at anything, any slight possibility of brokenness, of something missing. You're only allowed to speak in vague terms, vague indirect terms that doesn't really address the issue. The natural way that we subtly express these things is through body language. That's how humans express emotional distress. If you're physically around people and you're physically around someone who is lonely, and you, barring that you're like autistic or you can't read other people's emotions, which even people who don't have a straight up social disorder, even quote unquote normal individuals who lack significant in-person experience. I'm saying this because in the context of modern society, we're having less and less in-person interaction, which leads to less experience of understanding what another person's body language means. And also when you're isolated and you interpret other people's social interactions in general, if you're interpreting neutral stimuli that you're not too sure what's up, then an isolated individual is going to be more likely to be hostile as opposed to pro-social and looking on the bright side of things. These are largely unconscious instincts that are you can debate about the evolutionary psychology of being holdovers for survival, because if there's an unfamiliar tribe that you're interacting with and there's some neutral social stimuli where you're not completely sure what's going on, you're more likely to survive if you assume the worst.